wasn't very safe. And she said, well, there's no problem really because Dr. Ronald Mershon, who was at that time an MD, not a psychiatrist, he later became a psychiatrist, has just finished a course in birth control by correspondence. And I will make an appointment, Dorothy, for you to go to him. Well, that horrified me. I had grown up with Ronald. I had never had any physical examination. I said, oh, Mrs. Johnson, I can't do that. Oh, she says you must. So she said, and remember now, we don't need the blood test, we don't need all that. We'll go to Pascagoula, and you can get married in Pascagoula. Okay, I went to Ronald Mershon. Ronald and I have often laughed about this later. Dr. Mershon, he's on tape. His wife was a great niece of Florence Emma Pierce, a lovely person of Marietta Johnson. Not a great niece, a niece. And she was his assistant. And Ronald's little office was right there on Main Street next to Mershon Court. The Tractorville building still there. Well, you can imagine my embarrassment and my concern. And what in those days, what he had taken this course in was sequestration. So I went through that with much embarrassment. And the very next morning, we were to go and be married. And Paul Frederick, Marietta Johnson's nephew-in-law, had a car. So Marietta Johnson and Paul, my older sister Marie, who was the school home mother, Ken and I headed for Pascagoula. We asked for the marrying judge, as he was known. Well, he was in the barber shop. We had to wait a bit. And his miserable little office was pink. I'll never forget that. Well, he finally showed, and he married us, but he kept pronouncing my name Beezer. It's German. It's E-I, and E-I in German is by. I. It's Weiser. And we were very satisfied with him pronouncing me as Dorothy Beezer. And Aunt Mittie began to cry. She said, no, this can't be. She says, you're not properly married. And I said, Aunt Mittie, it doesn't, by that time I was calling her Aunt Mittie. I said, Aunt Mittie, it doesn't matter. She said, it matters very much. And the old judge was deaf. And she yelled at him, you say her name properly. So I was finally named properly. My little wedding ring was a little homemade ring Ken had made in the in the crafts. Then we went to lunch, and we were the guests of Aunt Mittie, of course. And then she announced that our honeymoon she had arranged and had paid for, and it was a delightful little kind of like a bed and breakfast thing down at Battles. Wonderful meals in a beautiful little place, and it was just south of the Grand Hotel in those days. And when she told us what she'd done, I was horrified. I said, Aunt Mittie, I'm sorry, but I'm not going where anybody knows us on our honeymoon. She said, what would you like to do? She said, I said, I want to go to Pensacola to the San Carlos. That's a magnificent hotel. She said, all right. So she wrote out a check for $25, and she handed it to me. Now this was the last day of 1935, New Year's Eve. She handed me a check, and she said, you must know that Kenneth will never learn how to handle money. He hasn't to this date, and he's mature enough, he should know, but he's not learned yet, so I'm making the check out to you. You'll have to handle the money. And Kenneth just smiled at her. It turned out to be very true. Kenny wasn't good about handling money. And we had to take the bus, go to Pensacola. We stayed at this beautiful hotel 2 nights, and we ate at the B&B restaurant, which was the restaurant in Pensacola in those days. And I can remember wanting to put my hand out so everybody would see my ring. wonderful little homemade ring. We went shopping. We bought a beautiful gold silk dress for me, which I needed very much for church. Kenny bought clothes. I bought a bathing suit. We took the bus home, and when we came home, we had $12 left out of $25. Now remember, whoever's listening to this was the first day or the last day of 1935 and the first couple of days of 1936. Ken was making $60 a month, of course his room and board. I was teaching. I was still just getting sort of a barter thing for my efforts, and I was playing for the church still. And very shortly after we were married, I guess it was Kenny's first paycheck, something like $1.80 was taken out of that $60 for a telephone call. That was our first marital scrap. I wanted to know what the $1.80 or whatever it was. Maybe it was $2.80. He said, well, I have a real good idea that we're going to make some money. Ken was born with ideas, and he died with ideas, for which I cherish. He said, we are going to send heart pine, bundled. We're going out and we're going to get the stumpage in cleared land and take the heart of those stumps, and we're going to cut it and send it north for kindling. And I know somebody in the northeast, that will help us get started or get the market for us. And you and I are going out to get the stumpage. I said, that's a marvelous idea, but a 2-cent stamp. We've contacted your friend. There'll be no more long-distance calls to get this thing off the road. So that was our first encounter of money and how it's going to be spent. That spring, I'm glad I had that experience. It was very difficult in the boarding department. I saw Kenneth almost not any time at all. It was worse than before we were married. As I say, his duties were so strenuous, and mine really were too. Sunday afternoons, we were supposed to be completely free. That was our time off. But Ken was wonderful in his sports, and he was playing on the town baseball team. So Sunday afternoons he played, and of course that was fine. I was glad to have that. But it wasn't a good way to start a marriage. There was no time for us really to be together, and that was an emotional strain. We had to leave, unfortunately, the school home when school was out. Mary Johnson was going to be going north, trying to raise money to open in the fall, and her niece, the secretary, and her husband and the 2 children, the 2 boys, needed the school home for their home, and it was right that they should have it for themselves. So we were having to go out and find something to rent. Well, there was an emotionally disturbed young woman, about 2 years older than I, taking teacher's training, living in the school home. And her brother was a dentist, and he was her custodian. And he did not want her to come back to Jacksonville, Florida, where they lived. He wanted her to stay in Fairhope. And he would pay $15 a week if we would take her to whatever we rented. And this has to do now, what I'm talking about, is the deep depression, of which I don't think is a healthy condition for anyone to have to endure. And yet, in my age now, I look back at it, still seeing so many of my peers, some younger, some a little older, that experienced the same hardships that I did, or that we did, and it seemed to do one of 2 things to us. It made us very insecure and very fearful, or it gave us a wonderful insight